thanks for meeting again. Basically, the series that I'm making is to kind of educate younger kids about all the different types of law and what you can be as a lawyer, because I know there's so many different like subsects of law. So it'll be good to kind of get more of like an idea of what that can be. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story. If you want to start just by like introducing yourself and kind of talking about like what you're doing now and how you got there.
Yeah, so my name is Kate Kulkarni, and I am a lawyer. I work for a boutique white collar healthcare and commercial litigation law firm in Manhattan. And I got here, my road to this job started, I guess, with law school. So I went to the University of Connecticut School of Law. I graduated from there in 2014. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, before that, right after college, I was a paralegal at an immigration and civil litigation law firm in Connecticut, and I really liked the experience. Sort of cemented what I thought, what I sort of had known for a while, but cemented, this idea that I wanted to go to law school. And then I started in law school the fall of 2011, and I liked law school. I think for me it was sort of a means to an end. It's interesting, sort of developing a different way of thinking, and developing your ability to analyze and writing and reading and digesting a lot of material. And so I think you learn a lot of really good skills. But for me, I was more interested in interning and sort of like working outside of the law school. So I think a lot of law schools offer this, but UConn, starting with your second year of law school, you can do externships for credits instead of in place of class credits. So you have to do a set number of class credits, but over that threshold, you can do externships and receive credit for that. So pretty much as soon as I was able to, I started doing externships every semester, every summer, and just to sort of like put feelers out there for like what kind of, and get a sense of like what areas of law I was interested in, what types of experiences I enjoyed. And I knew that I wanted to do something in public interest, but I wasn't quite sure what yet. So I interned at the US Attorney's Office for the District of Connecticut, the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which is the immigration court. Um, what else? Oh, the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, which mediates employment discrimination disputes, and the state's attorney's office in Boston, the district attorney's office of Boston. And then I think that was pretty much it. I might be leaving one out. It's been a while
Mhm.
now. But yeah, so again, realized I, wasn't interested in working for a law firm at that point. I wanted to do something in the public interest. And after working for a few different government organizations, I liked the idea of working for the government, sort of being a part of something that was bigger than myself, being part of a team that actually had the resources to, to do their jobs well. Um, and so after law school, I was supposed to come work in New York for a government agency, but then my, who was my fiance at the time, Sagar, got into business school in Boston. So I pivoted and I did a clerkship for the Massachusetts Superior Court for 2 years. That's the trial court. And
Mhm.
that was a great experience. It felt a little bit like an extension of law school in the sense that I wasn't actually signing my name to anything as an attorney. I was researching and writing draft memos for the judges, like internal research memos on issues of law that would come up during, in their cases on their docket, or I would also draft opinions for them on, on their behalf, sort of as a ghostwriter, which is what, law clerks do. And then they would send me edits, we would go back and forth, and I would help them, get to the final opinion that they would ultimately publish. So it was a really good experience. It was awesome to learn from judges that, lawyers that were way more senior than I was, had a lot, obviously a lot more experience. I think that's one of the cool parts of clerkships is that you're so young, junior coming out of law school, but you get you know, really good access to these really senior, well-respected lawyers who have become judges. So just, you get insight into the way they think, the way they view cases, the way they analyze cases, the way they, arrive at their ultimate decision making. And so that was a good experience. I did that for 2 years. And then I decided I was ready to, you know, be more like an attorney, be an attorney and sign my own name to documents. And so I went to, and at that point, I had also decided that I wanted to be a prosecutor. I had done 2 internships with prosecutors' offices in law school, and I had seen a lot of prosecutors in court during my time with the Superior Court during my clerkship. And I just, the criminal law I thought was so interesting and fascinating. I wanted to work with victims. I wanted to help victims. I wanted trial experience. I wanted all of the things that being a prosecutor offers you in a really unique way. So I accepted a job with the New York County District Attorney's Office, which is the Manhattan DA's office.
Mhm.
And they put me in the appeals division. So the DA's office in Manhattan, they handle all of their appeals. So, you know, um, a case comes in after an arrest has been made, the DA's office charges the defendant, and then it goes all the way. Sometimes there, it goes through the plea bargaining process. Sometimes it will result in a guilty plea. Sometimes it will result in a trial and then a conviction after trial, or not. And then if the case is appealed, which it almost always is, when there's a conviction, um, the appeals unit of the DA's office handles those appeals. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. I was kind of looking to uh, you know get trial experience and work more closely with victims, and appellate work you're a little bit further removed from victims because you're receiving the case after there's already been a conviction. And so it's really, you're handling issues of law, and very heavy on the writing and research. So it was great in the sense that I was able to hone my research and writing skills. I got to do appellate arguments in front of the first department, which is the state appellate court in New York City in Manhattan. And that was super fun. Like, I
Mhm.
was 27 doing these appellate arguments. Um and it was really, really fun. And um yeah, great experience. But I decided after 4 years of doing that, I did not want to be an appellate attorney long term. There were lots of aspects of the job that I really loved, but I'm a people person. I like to work on teams and work with people, and appellate work is a little bit more solitary. I mean, we were assigned editors who were more senior attorneys, and there was an editing process, a back and forth on briefs, and then we would be mooted, or before each oral argument, which is just where you meet with a group of attorneys and they ask you questions, sort of anticipating or trying to anticipate what the panel of judges might ask.
Mhm.
But most of the time it was just me at my computer researching and writing these really long briefs. So I decided I wanted to switch to the trial division. So I did that after 4 years in the appeals division. I switched to the trial division of the DA's office. And, right off the bat, was given hundreds of cases, and was, a very steep learning curve, just learning the process. I thought with my appellate background and sort of being immersed in that world, I would know a lot, and I did. It did help, but it's really, the trial division, being a trial prosecutor, it's really its own, its own beast. And so I learned that, and the camaraderie was great. I was able to fulfill my wish of working on a team and working with other people, and there's a ton of teamwork in the trial division. Presenting felony cases to the grand jury, uh, negotiating plea bargains, charging. After an arrests were made, working with the arresting officer to decide whether or not to actually charge a person, and if so, drafting the charging documents. Um, uh, Appearing at arraignments on behalf of the government. So really an incredible experience. Was able to work with victims very closely, worked with a lot of domestic violence victims, survivors of sexual assault. It was just an incredible experience. But then it sort of for me, again, sort of realizing that was maybe not the job that I wanted long term. The hours are really long, and it felt like it was not something that was sustainable for me long term. I was starting to have kids at that point, and just wanted something a little bit more predictable. The schedules are really unpredictable. Just something a little bit slower. So I decided to switch to the private sector,
Mhm.
and I joined the firm that I am currently at. The name is Abel Eskew Landau, and it's a small firm. The three partners I work for are all former federal prosecutors, and with backgrounds in criminal law, federal criminal law, and healthcare. So the firm, our primary practices are white collar, which is essentially representing people who have been charged by the government with white collar offenses, or people who are potentially facing charges by the government, or people who have piqued the interest of the government. All people who are, could be facing or are facing federal criminal charges are the majority of our clients. Um, and then, sort of within that, we have like a pretty active healthcare practice. So a lot of our clients are facing healthcare fraud related criminal charges. We do some healthcare civil work too. And then there's also a part of our practice that is more transactional, regulatory, sort of affirmatively advising healthcare clients like hospitals and small medical practices and even doctors on the legal risks of certain actions they might want to take, or certain decisions they might want to make. And then there's a small piece of our practice, which is commercial litigation, which is, just sort of like standard civil litigation representing small companies and business owners, and civil litigation in New York and New Jersey state courts. So it's been great. I've been there 2 years now. It's a small team, but everyone is very smart and nice, and it's a very collegial atmosphere, which was one of the things I love the most about the DA's office. So I've been really happy there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. How would you describe what you do like on a daily basis for the firm that you work at now?
Yeah. So my daily work, it's a combination of internal emailing with other attorneys, emailing with clients, phone calls with clients, emailing with government prosecutors. And then there's internal calls, like if I'm working on a case with another associate and a partner, and we might have internal calls on any given day about a particular case, just sort of like game planning, strategizing. What are the next steps? How are we viewing this case? What do we think the problems are for the client? How are we going to solve those problems or try to solve those problems? And then there's research. Although I'm sort of at the level now where I do get to delegate some of the research to the younger associates, but I do still do research myself as well. So research into legal issues that arise during, you know, in our cases, drafting motions, writing motions, memos of law, letters, drafting correspondence, and sometimes putting together presentations. Like next week, we are presenting to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the federal prosecutor's office for the Eastern District of New York. It's located in Brooklyn. And so today I spent most of my work day drafting a PowerPoint presentation to present to the government prosecutors, essentially trying to convince them not to charge our client with a crime.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's a mix of everything, which is why I like it so much. To be frank, I think, and for me also, it's the right volume. The appeals division, the DA's office was a little bit too slow. The trial division was way too fast, and so this is sort of in between where I have enough cases to work on that I feel like I'm busy, but I also, it's not, it's a small enough number that I feel like I can really give each case the time that it warrants and do the best possible job I can do for our clients.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, if you had to choose, what do you think your favorite parts of your job are now? Like,
Um, I think working with people you like is really important. I think, when I think about lawyers I know who are unhappy in their jobs. One of the biggest things is having, and some of this is unavoidable to some extent. Like everyone encounters, a boss that's difficult to work for, or a colleague that's particularly difficult to work for. And and you'll see, when you interview for jobs, at, you know, at that phase of life, that's often an interview question is, take us through a time that you have worked with a difficult person and how you got through it, because it's so common.
Mhm.
But to the extent that you can control that, I think working with the right people is really important. And so for me, one of my favorite parts of my job is just working with the people I work with, and then the actual presenting, like doing presentations to government attorneys is fun, because you worked really hard on them. We usually feel have a lot of conviction around them, really, really want to help our client. And so it's fun to actually get in there and try to be persuasive and, be a real advocate. And, these are people who are facing the potential loss of their liberty. So it's not, there is certainly something to lose. So it's very, it really motivates you to just like do your best, do the best job you can for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like working with people and presenting is such like an important part of any job and just life. So that makes a lot of sense. So you've obviously done like so many different things throughout your career. What would you say are like your proudest like accomplishments?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few I'd say. um I got to argue before the Court of Appeals for New York, which is the highest state court
Mhm.
of New York.
Yeah.
So most of my appellate arguments were for like the intermediate state appellate court. But this, every once in a while, the Court of Appeals, it doesn't have to grant leave to appeal. So they only decide to hear cases that are of interest, or that could involve some like statewide significant some issue of statewide significance. And so those arguments, they're fewer of them. But I did get to argue a case before the Court of Appeals, and that was really cool, because it's incredibly nerve wracking. They're televised. You can watch them online. They're live streamed. So, when you have a Court of Appeals argument, all of your colleagues are watching. And so it's just, and again, these cases are binding precedent, and they're really used throughout the whole state to, um, for guidance on laws and rules. So it's a nerve wracking experience, but I got to do it. And I remember coming back to the office, and the chief of appeals at the time, who was a real role model for me, gave me a hug and said I did a great job, and she was so proud of me. And that was a career highlight for sure. And I just respected her so much. So for her to, she wouldn't have told me that if she if she thought I'd done a bad job. So that was really nice. And then when I was in the trial division, I got this case that um was came in as a misdemeanor assault. But then I spoke to the victim, and it turns out he had suffered really, really horrible injuries. And then I looked a little bit more into the defendant, and learned that, like, he had, a pretty bad history of committing violent crime. And so I went to my supervisor, and and again, I'm not, I'm a pretty liberal person. So I tend to, think undercharging is better, as opposed to overcharging. And, I lower sentences are better. Like as far as prosecutors go, I was definitely on the liberal liberal side. But this guy was really traumatized, and had been really, really severely injured. And I and it had just been sort of missed when the case first came in and was charged as a misdemeanor. So I went to my supervisor, and I said, I think we should bump this up to a felony. This guy presents a real danger to the community. And he had since been threatening the victim. So the victim was really scared, and the victim had been very injured. And he said, okay, yeah, I think you're right. And then I presented it to the grand jury. And I remember I was 8 months pregnant at the time, and
Wow.
just, like waddling around the grand jury, examining witnesses. That was it. And and we did the grand jury did find probable cause to indict him. So that was a career highlight for sure. And then more recently, I did a presentation to the U.S. Attorney's Office with the partner on the case, and I did most of the presentation. And it sounds like they are deciding, that they haven't told us officially yet, but they have not charged him yet, and they charged his boss. Um, and they chose not to charge him in that same indictment, which is a really good sign.
But yeah, those accomplishments were incredible. Like I can't even like imagine. Um, it must have been so like nerve-wracking, but so fun at the same time. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think, and I've learned that it's funny you use those words because I've learned that the way to counteract nerves, which, especially as a litigator, there's a lot of public speaking and, a lot of just sort of stressful situations you find yourself in, is to go in with the idea that this was going to be fun, which
mhm,
sounds silly, but I remember before my first appellate argument, one of the more senior attorneys said to me the best advice he had ever received was just to have fun.
yeah,
And because if you go with it from that perspective, then like you just kind of loosen up a little bit and
yeah,
you
definitely.
enjoy it. You can sort of take it at face value and just kind of roll with the punches and you do your best.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so was there like a specific moment you remember or just like a time that like actually sparked your interest in law, or were you just kind of just like exploring new things? How did you first become interested in law or know that you wanted to do that?
It's funny. I feel like I don't have a very good answer to that question because my parents actually put the idea in my head.
Oh,
Apparently, I was a
really?
very bossy kid. And they had just, they were like, oh, Katie's going to be a lawyer one day. And then I guess in college, I was a political science major and I learned that I was pretty good at writing. And, I knew law was pretty writing intensive. And then I really liked the idea of, I guess I was always someone that was really bothered by like injustice, as cheesy as it
Yeah,
sounds,
no,
but like stuff that goes wrong in the world and stuff that's unfair, that always really bothered me, like, just inherently, even as a teenager. And so I liked the idea of getting a law degree because I felt like I could use that to sort of level the playing field for some people, or just help make an impact in some way. Like for me, getting a law degree, I associated that with like power to help others.
mhm,
And then, I worked at that immigration law firm after college, and I just really, a lot of our clients were asylum seekers, or people who had gone through horrors in their countries and had, gone through horrors trying to get here and getting here, and then we're here and, had made one mistake. So we're facing deportation, but, their kids were here, their families were here, and they didn't want to go back to the violent situations that they had fled,
mhm,
from their home countries. And I just saw immigration work is really hard because you lose so much of the time, but still, watching the attorneys advocate for them and like sort of be the person that was trying to help keep them here, and they just felt so powerless. And I really saw like, the power of an advocate, to a good advocate, at least to make some difference, or at least try.
mhm. Yeah, that's definitely so important just to be an advocate. So like you said, a good piece of advice is obviously to have fun for anything. Do you have any like other final words of inspiration or advice that you would give to especially like young women who are like starting to look at this career or think about it as a possibility?
Yeah, I look, I think obviously law is like, like most careers, I think is still male dominated. It certainly is at the top. I think be confident, I think, is helpful. Like I think everyone, when you're in your 20s and when you're a teenager, there can be like some imposter syndrome, which is really normal. Like you kind of feel like, maybe I'm not good enough for this. And I think all that self-doubt and fear is normal, especially if you're a woman. Like I think
Definitely.
not saying that men don't have that either, but I think that is for sure more pronounced in women. At least that's been my experience. So just try to like quiet that noise and be confident. And if you put your head down and work hard and have the right attitude, and you want to be good at it, you will be good at it, and people will recognize that. So you don't necessarily need to be loud about it. I think the proof is in your work, and people will recognize your hard work and your talent.